The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Marguerite Caldwell's slender shoulders as she trudged across the vast, unforgiving desert, her 6-month-old daughter cradled against her chest. Blood trickled from her cracked lips, her once fine dress now tattered and stained with the red dust of the frontier. It was 1875, and she was alone in the world, or so she believed, until a silhouette appeared on the horizon. The unmistakable outline of a rider approaching through the heat-rippled air. Marguerite's knees buckled beneath her as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. The precious bundle in her arms felt impossibly heavy after 3 days with barely a drop of water to share between them. Her baby's cries had grown weaker with each passing hour, a sound more terrifying than the howl of coyotes that had stalked them through the night. "Stay awake," she whispered to herself, her throat raw. Just stay awake, but her body betrayed her. As the rider drew closer, Marguerite felt herself pitching forward. With her last conscious thought, she twisted to shield her child from the fall. When she opened her eyes again, the merciless sun had been replaced by canvas shade. A tin cup touched her lips, and water-blessed water trickled into her mouth. Marguerite gasped and tried to sit up. "Easy now," came a deep voice. "You're safe." Her eyes focused on a man kneeling beside her. Broad-shouldered and sun-bronzed, with eyes the color of a summer storm. His weathered hands were surprisingly gentle as he supported her head. "My baby," she croaked, panic rising in her chest. "Where's my baby?" "She's right here." The stranger nodded toward a makeshift cradle fashioned from a saddle blanket. "I gave her some goat's milk, had some in my supplies. She took to it real well." Relief flooded through Marguerite as she saw her daughter sleeping peacefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "Who are you?" "Isaac Blackwood," he replied, settling back on his heels. "Most folks just call me Ike, Marguerite Caldwell." She tried to smile, but her lips cracked painfully. "And that's Emma." Isaac nodded, his expression somber beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "What in God's name were you doing out here alone with a baby, Mrs. Caldwell?" "Miss," she corrected automatically. "I was running." Isaac didn't press her further. Instead, he offered more water and a piece of jerky softened in the tin cup. "We're about half a day's ride from Copper Springs." "My horse can carry you both once you've rested." Marguerite closed her eyes briefly. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," Isaac said, his voice gruff with an emotion she couldn't identify. Any decent man would have done the same. But as Marguerite drifted back to sleep, she knew that wasn't true. Not all men were decent. She had learned that lesson the hard way. When she woke again, the sun was lower in the sky. Isaac was cradling Emma, one large finger captured in the baby's tiny fist as he spoke to her in low, rumbling tones. The sight struck Marguerite like a physical blow, a picture of tenderness she'd never expected to see. "She likes you," Marguerite said softly. Isaac looked up, a hint of color rising to his tan cheeks. "Guess she's not too particular." But there was a gentleness in his eyes that belied his gruff words. "Think you can ride? We should get to town before dark." Marguerite nodded, though her body protested as she rose unsteadily to her feet. Isaac handed Emma back to her, then went to prepare his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion with intelligent eyes. "This is Thunder," Isaac said, patting the horse's neck. "He's strong enough to carry all 3 of us, though he might complain about it." He helped Marguerite mount, then handed Emma up to her before swinging into the saddle behind them. His arms formed a protective circle as he took the reins, and despite herself, Marguerite felt safer than she had in months. They rode in silence for a time, the rhythmic movement of the horse nearly lulling Marguerite back to sleep. Emma dozed contentedly against her chest. "Where were you headed?" Isaac finally asked. "California," Marguerite admitted. "My cousin lives in San Francisco. I thought I could start fresh there." Isaac nodded. "Long journey to make alone. I had no choice." The words slipped out before she could stop them. His arms tightened slightly around her. "Someone after you?" Marguerite hesitated. "My late husband's brother, he believes Emma should be raised by him, that I'm unfit." She felt Isaac stiffen behind her. "And what do you believe?" "That I'd die before I let him take her." The fierceness in her voice surprised even her. Isaac was quiet for a long moment. Well, Miss Caldwell, seems to me you nearly did just that. There are better ways to keep your child safe than dying in the desert. His bluntness stung, but Marguerite couldn't deny the truth of his words. I didn't plan well, she admitted. I had more supplies when I started, but the stagecoach was robbed. The bandits took everything except what I could hide in Emma's blankets. Isaac swore softly. That stretch between Tucson and here has been plagued with robberies. Sheriff can't seem to catch the gang responsible. As they crested a small rise, the town of Copper Springs came into view, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. It wasn't much, but to Marguerite, it looked like salvation. I have a small place just outside town, Isaac said. You and the little one can stay there tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to get you to California. Marguerite turned her head slightly. Why are you helping us? His eyes met hers, steady and clear. Let's just say I know what it's like to be alone with nowhere to turn. The small place turned out to be a surprisingly well-kept cabin with a corral and a small barn. A vegetable garden grew at one side and a chicken coop stood at the other. It's not much, Isaac said as he helped her down from Thunder, but it's home. It was more than Marguerite had expected from a cowboy. The interior was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, and a curtained-off sleeping space. You'll take the bed, Isaac said, nodding toward the curtain. I'll sleep by the fire. I couldn't possibly. No arguments, Miss Caldwell. His tone was firm. You and the little one need proper rest. Marguerite was too exhausted to protest further. After a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee, she retreated behind the curtain with Emma. The bed was narrow but comfortable, with a handmade quilt that smelled of cedar and sunshine. As she laid Emma beside her, the baby's eyes opened, bright and alert despite the day's hardships. We're safe tonight, Marguerite whispered, brushing a kiss against her daughter's forehead. And tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. From beyond the curtain, she could hear Isaac moving about, the soft clink of dishes, the creak of floorboards. Ordinary sounds that somehow made her feel secure for the first time in months. Before she knew it, she had drifted into a dreamless sleep. The smell of coffee and bacon woke her the next morning. For a moment, Marguerite was disoriented, but then the events of the previous day came rushing back. Emma was still sleeping soundly beside her, one tiny fist curled against her cheek. Marguerite slipped from the bed, attempting to straighten her disheveled appearance before stepping beyond the curtain. Isaac stood at the stove, his back to her. Without his hat, she could see that his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Good morning, she said softly. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face transformed his rugged features. Morning, how'd you sleep? Better than I have in weeks, she admitted. Thank you. He gestured to the table where plates were already set. Sit, eat, we've got decisions to make. The food was simple but delicious, and Marguerite realized how hungry she truly was. Isaac watched her with something like satisfaction as she cleaned her plate. I rode into town at first light, he said as he refilled her coffee cup. Stagecoach doesn't come through for another 5 days. Marguerite's heart sank. 5 days, but I know your brother-in-law. Isaac's expression darkened. How far behind you is he? I don't know, she admitted. I slipped away in the night 3 weeks ago. He might not even know which direction I took. Isaac rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. 5 days is a long time to sit and wait, especially if he's on your trail. I can find work in town, Marguerite said quickly, to pay for our room and board. I'm good with numbers and I can sew. That's not what concerns me. Isaac leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. Copper Springs is small, strangers get noticed. If this man comes looking, everyone will remember a young woman with a baby. The fear that had been her constant companion for months rose again. What choice do I have? Isaac was quiet for a long moment. I might have an idea, but you're not going to like it. What is it? Marry me. Marguerite nearly dropped her coffee cup. I beg your pardon. Not for real, Isaac added hastily, color rising to his face. Just on paper. If you're Mrs. Blackwood, no one will be looking for Miss Caldwell, and a man would think twice about trying to take a child from another man's wife. Marguerite stared at him, speechless. The proposition was outrageous, improper, and yet practical in a way she couldn't dismiss. "You would do that?" she finally managed to ask. "For a woman you just met," something flickered in Isaac's eyes. "I told you, I know what it's like to have nowhere to turn. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "it would only be temporary. Once you're safely in California, you can file for annulment." Before Marguerite could respond, Emma began to cry. She hurried to the bedside and returned with the baby, who quieted as soon as she was in her mother's arms. "She's hungry," Marguerite said unnecessarily. Isaac nodded and stood. "I'll give you some privacy, got chores to tend to anyway." When he had gone, Marguerite sat feeding Emma, her mind whirling with the unexpected proposal. Marriage, even one in name only, was the last thing she had expected when she fled Philadelphia. And yet, there was something about Isaac Blackwood that made her trust him, despite the brevity of their acquaintance. By the time Isaac returned, Marguerite had made her decision. "If we do this," she said as he stepped through the door, "there need to be conditions." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "It's temporary, as you said. When I reach California, we'll end it legally." He nodded. "Agreed." And Marguerite hesitated, heat rising to her cheeks. "This is a marriage of convenience only. We won't, that is." "I understand, Miss Caldwell," Isaac said, his expression serious. "I'm offering protection, not demanding anything in return." Relief flooded through her. "Then I accept." Isaac's smile was surprisingly warm. "Good. I'll speak to the preacher today. And I reckon we should start using first names, Marguerite." The way he said her name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. The wedding took place the following afternoon in the small white church on the edge of town. Marguerite wore her cleanest dress, hastily mended with thread borrowed from Isaac's surprisingly well-stocked sewing basket. Isaac had trimmed his beard and donned a clean shirt with a string tie, looking more respectable than she would have thought possible. Reverend Thompson didn't question their haste, assuming, like most frontier preachers, that the baby sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby explained everything. The few witnesses were strangers to Marguerite, the general store owner, and his wife, who had taken a motherly interest in the young couple's situation. "Do you, Isaac James Blackwood, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Isaac's voice was steady, his hand warm around hers. "And do you, Marguerite Elizabeth Caldwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Marguerite hesitated only a fraction of a second. "I do." "Then, by the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you man and wife." The preacher smiled benevolently. "You may kiss your bride." This was something they hadn't discussed. Marguerite felt a moment of panic, but Isaac simply leaned forward and pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek, his hand squeezing hers reassuringly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blackwood," the storekeeper's wife said afterward, pressing a small package into Marguerite's hands. "Just a few things to welcome you to Copper Springs." "Thank you," Marguerite managed, the new name sounding strange to her ears. As they rode back to the cabin, her new home, at least temporarily, Marguerite felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. She was no longer alone, no longer defenseless. But she had tied herself to a man she barely knew in a town miles from her intended destination, having second thoughts. Isaac asked quietly as he helped her down from the wagon he'd borrowed for the occasion. "No," Marguerite said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Are you?" He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "No," he finally said, "but there's something you should know." Marguerite felt a flicker of alarm. "What is it?" "I'm not just a cowboy." Isaac led her to the porch and gestured for her to sit. "I own the Circle B Ranch about 10 miles from here. 3,000 acres, 100 head of cattle, and a dozen hands who work for me." Marguerite stared at him. "But this cabin is where I come when I need peace and quiet." Isaac settled beside her on the porch step. "The main house at the ranch is bigger, more comfortable for a family. I thought we should move there tomorrow." "You're a rancher," Marguerite said slowly, trying to absorb this new information. "Why didn't you tell me?" Isaac shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Most women I meet are more interested in my ranch than in me. I prefer people to take me as I am, not for what I own." It was a sentiment Marguerite understood all too well. Her own brief marriage had taught her the bitter lesson that some men valued wealth above all else. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly, "but it doesn't change anything. Our arrangement is still temporary." Isaac nodded, but something in his eyes made Marguerite wonder if he believed that as firmly as she did. The Circle B ranch was more impressive than Marguerite had imagined. The main house was a sprawling two-story structure built of stone and timber, with a wide veranda wrapping around three sides. Cottonwood trees provided shade, and a creek bubbled nearby. Outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse completed the compound, while in the distance, cattle grazed on rolling grasslands. "It's beautiful," Marguerite said as Isaac helped her down from the wagon. "Been in my family for 20 years, he replied, pride evident in his voice. "My father built it from nothing." A middle-aged woman emerged from the house, her weathered face breaking into a smile. "About time you brought her home. I was beginning to think you made the whole thing up. Marguerite, this is Mrs. Abigail Fletcher. She keeps house for me and doesn't mince words, as you can see." "Welcome, Mrs. Blackwood," Abigail said, her keen eyes taking in Marguerite and Emma. "And this must be the little one. May I?" Before Marguerite could respond, Abigail had scooped Emma from her arms with practiced ease. "What a beauty! She has your eyes, madam, but I think she's got her papa's chin." Marguerite exchanged a startled glance with Isaac, who cleared his throat. "Mrs. Fletcher, would you show Marguerite to our room? She's had a long journey and needs rest." "Of course." Abigail handed Emma back with obvious reluctance. "Follow me, dear. I've aired out the master bedroom and put fresh linens on the bed." As Marguerite followed the housekeeper inside, she heard boots on the porch behind them and a man's voice calling for Isaac. The reality of her situation hit her anew. She was now mistress of this ranch, at least in the eyes of everyone around them. The deception made her uncomfortable, but when she thought of Gregory Caldwell and what he would do if he found her, she knew she had no choice. The master bedroom was spacious and airy, with a large four-poster bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a rocking chair by the window. It was clearly a man's room with few ornaments, but someone, Abigail, presumably had placed a vase of wildflowers on the bedside table. "I hope it meets with your approval," Abigail said, watching Marguerite's face. "The boss said you left most of your belongings behind when you eloped. We can order anything you need from the catalog, or there's fabric in the storeroom if you sew." "It's lovely," Marguerite assured her. "And yes, I do so. I would appreciate the fabric." Abigail beamed. Finally, a practical lady of the house. The last woman who visited that was the boss's cousin's wife complained from sunup to sundown about the lack of proper furnishings. Marguerite couldn't help but smile at the housekeeper's forthright manner. "I assure you, Mrs. Fletcher, I've learned to appreciate simple comforts. Call me Abigail, dear, and I'll have a bath brought up for you before dinner. The men will be coming in from the range soon, and they'll all want to meet the woman who finally caught Isaac Blackwood." After Abigail left, Marguerite sat on the edge of the bed, Emma cradled in her arms. "What have I gotten us into, little one?" she whispered. The baby gurgled in response, waving a tiny fist. "You're right," Marguerite said with a sigh. "At least we're safe, for now." The promised bath was heaven after weeks of travel with limited opportunities for proper cleanliness. Abigail had found a nightgown and robe that must have belonged to Isaac's mother, and though they were slightly large, they were made of fine cotton and felt luxurious against Marguerite's skin. She was brushing her damp hair when a knock came at the door. "Marguerite, may I come in?" Isaac's voice sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. "Yes, of course," he entered, hat in hand, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. "I wanted to make sure you were settling in." "Everyone has been very kind," Marguerite said, "especially Abigail." Isaac smiled. "She's been with us since I was a boy, practically raised me after my mother died. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It was a long time ago." Isaac moved to the window, looking out at the gathering dusk. "I should have warned you that the men would be curious. They've never seen me show interest in any woman, let alone bring one home as a wife." Marguerite set down her brush. "What did you tell them about us? That we met when I was in Tucson on business, that you were widowed with a child, and that we fell in love quickly." He turned to face her. I kept it simple. Fewer details means fewer chances to contradict ourselves. And they believed you, that you would marry a widow with another man's child. Something flickered in Isaac's eyes. Why wouldn't they? Emma is a blessing, not a burden. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, touched something deep inside Marguerite. How different Isaac was from Gregory, who had viewed Emma as an inconvenience from the moment of her birth. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you're doing." Isaac shifted, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I had Abigail set up a cot in my study. I'll sleep there while you take the bedroom. But won't that seem strange to the household, a newly married couple sleeping apart?" "Abigail thinks you're still recovering from your journey and that Emma's midnight feedings would disturb me." He gave a half smile. "She's a romantic at heart, but practical too." Marguerite nodded, relieved. "I should feed Emma before dinner." Understanding her need for privacy, Isaac moved toward the door. "I'll come fetch you when the meal is ready." After he left, Marguerite settled in the rocking chair with Emma. As she nursed her daughter, she found herself contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she had been virtually a prisoner in her brother-in-law's Philadelphia mansion. Now she was the supposed wife of a cattle rancher in Arizona Territory, living in a house grander than she had expected, surrounded by people who accepted her without question. It was an illusion, of course. A temporary refuge. But as Emma's eyelids grew heavy with contentment, Marguerite allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like if this were real, if Isaac truly were her husband and this their home. The thought should have frightened her after the disaster of her first marriage. Instead, it brought an unexpected warmth to her chest. Dinner was a lively affair, with Abigail serving roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread to Isaac and his foreman, a weathered man named Frank who tipped his hat to Marguerite with old-fashioned courtesy. "The other boys wanted to meet you too," Frank explained as he passed the potatoes, "but the boss thought it might be overwhelming, you being new and all." "Perhaps another time," Marguerite said with a smile, "once I'm more settled." Isaac watched her from the head of the table, a curious expression on his face. She was adapting quickly, showing none of the haughty manners he might have expected from an Eastern lady. Instead, she listened with genuine interest as Frank described the ranch operations, asked intelligent questions, and even laughed at his somewhat rough humor. After dinner, when Frank had gone to the bunkhouse and Abigail was clearing the dishes, Isaac walked Marguerite back to the bedroom. "You were wonderful tonight," he said quietly. "Frank is already half in love with you." Marguerite blushed. "He's a kind man, they all seem to be." "The ranch has that effect," Isaac said. "Good, honest work tends to bring out the best in people." He hesitated at the bedroom door. "Will you be comfortable? Is there anything you need?" The concern in his voice touched her. "We'll be fine. But Isaac, we need to discuss how long this arrangement will last. The stagecoach comes in 4 days. His expression changed, becoming more guarded. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. It might be safer if you stayed longer." "Longer? But just hear me out," Isaac said, holding up a hand. "If your brother-in-law is searching for you, he'll be watching the stagecoach routes. But if you wait a month or two, he might give up, or at least widen his search elsewhere." Marguerite frowned. "A month or two, Isaac, I can't impose on you for that long. It's not an imposition." His voice was firm. "The ranch is large, and one more mouth to feed makes no difference. 2, counting Emma. That's not the point. This was supposed to be temporary. It still is, just longer temporary." Isaac ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of frustration. "Think about it, at least, for Emma's sake." He had found her weakness, her daughter's safety. "I'll think about it," Marguerite conceded, "but I won't make any promises." Isaac nodded, clearly sensing it was the best he would get. "Good night, then." "Good night, Isaac." As she closed the door behind him, Marguerite wondered why the thought of staying longer didn't alarm her as much as it should have. The next few days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. In the mornings, Isaac would ride out with the ranch hands, returning at midday to take his dinner in the kitchen with Marguerite, Abigail, and Emma. Afternoons were spent on ranch business in his study, while Marguerite helped Abigail with household tasks or worked on sewing new clothes for herself and Emma from the fabric the housekeeper had provided. In the evenings, they would sit on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. Sometimes they talked about books they had read, places they had seen, dreams they once held. Other times they simply sat in companionable silence, Emma sleeping contentedly in a basket between them. It was during one such evening, nearly a week after their arrival at the ranch, that Isaac finally asked the question Marguerite had been dreading. "What happened with your first husband?" Marguerite's hands stilled on the shirt she was mending. "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes I see fear in your eyes," Isaac said quietly. "Not of me, but of something in your past, and if I'm to protect you properly, I should know what or who we're dealing with." She was silent for so long that Isaac began to think she wouldn't answer. But finally, she set aside her sewing and looked out at the darkening landscape. "His name was William Caldwell," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was charming, handsome, and from one of Philadelphia's oldest families. My father was delighted when he proposed." Isaac waited, sensing there was much more to the story. "What none of us knew was that the Caldwell fortune was gone, squandered by William's father on bad investments and gambling. William needed a wealthy wife to maintain appearances, and I was suitable." Her voice hardened. "My father died 3 months after the wedding. That's when William showed his true nature." "He hurt you," Isaac said, not a question but a certainty. Marguerite nodded, still not looking at him. "He controlled everything, the money, where I went, who I spoke to. When I became pregnant, he was furious. He had married me for my inheritance, not for a family." Isaac's hands clenched on the arms of his chair, but he remained silent. When Emma was born, he refused to even look at her. He was drinking heavily by then, losing what remained of our money at the gaming tables. Marguerite took a shaky breath. "One night he came home drunk, raging about his debts. He said he should sell the baby to pay what he owed." "My God," Isaac muttered. "I confronted him. We argued. He struck me and I fell against the fireplace hearth." Marguerite's hand went unconsciously to a thin scar at her temple. "I don't know if he meant to kill me, but he left me there, bleeding. The housekeeper found me the next morning. Where was William? Gone. He had taken a fast horse from the stables and ridden away. 3 days later, his body was found in an alley behind a gambling hall. He had been stabbed by another gambler in a dispute over cards." Isaac released a slow breath. "I'm sorry, Marguerite. I grieved not for the man he was, but for the man I thought I had married," she said softly. "I had no family left except a distant cousin in California. But before I could make arrangements to leave Philadelphia, William's brother Gregory appeared. The one who's after you now?" Marguerite nodded. "He was William's older brother, a businessman with interests in banking and railroads. He insisted that as the new head of the Caldwell family, Emma was his responsibility. He claimed I was unfit to raise her because of my common background." Isaac's expression darkened. "He had no legal right. He had money and influence," Marguerite countered. "And he made it clear that he would use both to take Emma from me. When I refused to give her up, he moved us into his home, ostensibly to help me during my mourning period. In reality, we were prisoners. How did you escape?" I planned carefully. "For months, I pretended to accept my situation while secretly selling my jewelry piece by piece to a sympathetic maid. When I had enough money, I waited for a night when Gregory was away on business. The maid helped me slip away with Emma and what few belongings I could carry." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, absorbing her story. "And you think he's still pursuing you?" "I know he is," Marguerite said with certainty. "Gregory Caldwell doesn't give up what he considers his property, and in his mind, Emma is a Caldwell, not a Holloway. Holloway, my maiden name." Marguerite managed a small smile. "And now, apparently, I'm a Blackwood." Isaac reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "As long as you're a Blackwood, Marguerite, no one will take your daughter from you. I promise you that." The conviction in his voice brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat together as darkness fell completely, their hands still joined, neither willing to break the connection that had formed between them. The next morning, Marguerite woke to the sound of raised voices from the yard. She hurried to the window, Emma still drowsy in her arms, and peered out. Isaac stood facing a man she didn't recognize, tall, expensively dressed, with a bearing that spoke of arrogance and entitlement. Her blood ran cold. It couldn't be, not so soon. Throwing on a robe, she hurried to the top of the stairs, straining to hear the conversation. "Looking for my sister-in-law," the stranger was saying. "Marguerite Caldwell, traveling with an infant. Have you seen them?" Isaac's voice was calm, controlled. "Can't say that I have. Not many women travel these parts alone, especially with a baby. She's quite distinctive. Blonde hair, blue eyes. The child is 6 months old." "Sorry," Isaac said. "Wish I could help. What's your interest in finding her?" The man in Marguerite was now certain it was Gregory stiffened. "That's a family matter. If you do see her, I'm staying at the hotel in Copper Springs. Gregory Caldwell is the name." "I'll keep an eye out," Isaac promised, his posture relaxed but watchful. "Though if she's running from you, Mr. Caldwell, she must have her reasons." Gregory's face hardened. "As I said, it's a family matter. Good day." Marguerite retreated from the stairs as Gregory mounted his horse and rode away. Moments later, she heard Isaac's boots on the steps. "You heard?" he asked when he found her in the bedroom. Emma clutched to her chest. Marguerite nodded, unable to speak past the fear constricting her throat. "He doesn't know you're here," Isaac assured her, crossing to her side, "and he won't find out. I've already sent Frank to alert the hands no one's to mention my new wife to any strangers." "He found me," Marguerite whispered. "How did he find me?" "He's been tracking you from stagecoach stop to stagecoach stop," Isaac explained, "asking questions, showing your photograph. He's methodical, I'll give him that." "I have to leave," Marguerite said, moving toward the wardrobe. "If I stay, I'll put you and everyone here in danger." Isaac caught her arm. "You're not thinking clearly. Where would you go?" "He's watching the roads, the stagecoach station." "You'd be caught before you made it 10 miles. "Then what do you suggest?" she demanded, fear making her voice sharp. "We stick to the plan," Isaac said firmly. "You're Marguerite Blackwood now, my wife. Emma is my daughter. We'll make sure Gregory sees us together in town as a family. Once he's convinced you're not here, he'll move on to search elsewhere." Marguerite shook her head. "It's too risky. What if he recognizes me?" "We'll change your appearance," Isaac said, his mind working quickly. "Abigail can help. Darken your hair, perhaps, different clothes. And you'll be with me where he least expects to find you, as the wife of a rancher he's already spoken to." It was a bold plan, perhaps even a foolish one, but as Marguerite looked into Isaac's determined face, she found herself nodding. "All right," she agreed softly. "We'll try it your way." Abigail proved to be not only willing but enthusiastic about the deception. By mid-afternoon, Marguerite's golden hair had been darkened to a rich chestnut with a concoction of walnut shells and coffee. Dressed in a simple but well-made blue gown that Abigail had altered from one of her own, with her hair styled differently, Marguerite hardly recognized herself in the small mirror. "Perfect," Abigail declared, stepping back to admire her work. "Your own mother wouldn't know you." "It's incredible," Marguerite agreed, turning her head to examine her transformed reflection. "Do you really think it will fool Gregory?" "Men don't notice details the way women do," Abigail said confidently. "Especially men like that, too full of themselves to really look at others." Isaac's reaction when he saw her was everything Marguerite could have hoped for. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening as they swept over her. "Well," she asked, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze, "you look." He seemed to search for the right word. "Beautiful." Different, but still beautiful. The compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. "Thank you. Do you think it will be enough, combined with the fact that he'll see you as my wife?" "Yes." Isaac offered his arm. "Now, are you ready to make your debut as Mrs. Blackwood in Copper Springs?" Marguerite took a deep breath and placed her hand on his arm. "As ready as I'll ever be." The ride into town was tense, with Marguerite constantly scanning the road for any sign of Gregory. Emma, blissfully unaware of the danger, slept in a sling across Marguerite's chest, occasionally making soft sounds of contentment. "Remember," Isaac said as they approached the outskirts of Copper Springs, "you were born in St. Louis, we met in Tucson, and we've been married for nearly a year. Emma is ours." Marguerite nodded, repeating the details of their fabricated history in her mind. And your ranch hands all know to support this story. Every last one, Isaac confirmed. They're loyal men. The town was busier than Marguerite remembered from her brief visit on her wedding day. Saturday was apparently market day, with farmers and ranchers from the surrounding area bringing produce and livestock to sell. The main street was lined with wagons, and people crowded the wooden sidewalks. Isaac helped Marguerite down from the wagon, then kept a protective arm around her waist as they made their way toward the general store. The gesture wasn't just for show. Marguerite found herself genuinely grateful for his steady presence as her eyes darted among the strangers, searching for Gregory's tall figure. Mrs. Blackwood, the storekeeper's wife, Martha Wilson, hurried forward to greet them. "How lovely to see you again." "And this must be the baby, may I?" Before Marguerite could respond, Martha had pulled back the edge of the sling to peek at Emma. "Oh, she's precious. She has your eyes, but I think she favors her papa in the chin." Isaac smiled proudly, playing his role to perfection. "That's what everyone says." Martha beamed at them both. "Well, don't be strangers. I have some new fabrics in that would make beautiful dresses for the little one." As they moved through town, similar scenes played out again and again. The residents of Copper Springs had clearly embraced the story of Isaac's whirlwind romance and marriage, and they welcomed Marguerite with open arms as the wife of one of the area's most respected ranchers. It was outside the bank that they finally encountered Gregory Caldwell. He was emerging from the building just as they approached, his expression preoccupied. Isaac felt Marguerite stiffen beside him and tightened his arm around her waist. "Mr. Caldwell," Isaac called, his voice friendly, "find any trace of your sister-in-law yet?" Gregory looked up, irritation crossing his features before he schooled them into a polite mask. "Mr. Blackwood, was it? No, I'm afraid not, but I'm continuing my search." His eyes flicked briefly to Marguerite, then back to Isaac. "Is this your wife? I don't believe we've been introduced." "Indeed it is," Isaac said proudly. "Marguerite, this is Mr. Gregory Caldwell from Philadelphia. He's looking for a relative who may have passed through these parts." Marguerite forced herself to smile, though her heart was hammering so loudly she was sure Gregory must hear it. "How do you do, Mr. Caldwell?" Gregory nodded politely, his gaze dropping to the sling. "And this must be your child, a beautiful family, Mr. Blackwood." "Thank you," Isaac said. "We think so." There was a moment of tension as Gregory's eyes lingered on Marguerite's face, and she felt a cold sweat break out along her spine. But then he was looking back at Isaac. "I don't suppose you've asked around about my sister-in-law, among your ranch hands, perhaps?" Isaac shook his head. "I have, actually. No one recalls seeing a woman matching her description." "How long do you plan to continue your search in these parts?" Gregory's mouth tightened. "I had planned to move on to Tucson tomorrow, but I've just received information that she may have headed north instead." "I'll be taking the morning stage to Prescott." Relief flooded through Marguerite, though she was careful not to let it show on her face. "I hope you find her," she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. "Family is so important." "Yes," Gregory agreed, his expression hardening. "It is." "Well, I won't keep you. Good day, Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Blackwood." As he walked away, Marguerite sagged against Isaac's side, her knees suddenly weak. "He didn't recognize me," she whispered. "Of course he didn't," Isaac murmured, guiding her toward the wagon. He was looking for a frightened widow on the run, not the confident wife of a rancher. But as they climbed into the wagon for the journey home, Marguerite couldn't shake the feeling that it had been too easy. Gregory was not a man to give up so quickly, especially when he believed he was in the right. Her fears proved justified the next morning, when Frank rode in from town with news that made Isaac's face darken with anger. "Caldwell didn't take the stage to Prescott," Frank reported. "He hired a guide and a horse instead, said he wanted to explore the territory a bit before moving on. He suspects something," Isaac said grimly, "or he's just being thorough." "What do we do now?" Marguerite asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. Isaac thought for a moment. "We continue as we are. You're my wife, this is your home, and Emma is our daughter. If Caldwell comes sniffing around the ranch, that's the story he'll hear from everyone. And if he sees through the disguise," Marguerite pressed. If he demands to see our marriage certificate or questions when we were married. I have the certificate right here, Isaac said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. As for the timing, we'll say we married in haste because of the baby. It's a common enough story. Marguerite wasn't convinced, but she nodded anyway. I just hope he gives up soon. He will, Isaac assured her, though his eyes were troubled. Men like Gregory Caldwell always have other priorities calling them back to their business, but Gregory didn't give up. Over the next week, reports came in of him asking questions all over the county, showing Marguerite's photograph to anyone who would look. He even visited the neighboring ranches, ostensibly to inquire about cattle prices but really to continue his search. The constant threat of discovery wore on Marguerite. She lost weight, and dark circles appeared under her eyes despite Isaac's assurances that she was safe. Each day, she expected to look up and find Gregory at the door, demanding she return with him to Philadelphia. It was Emma who finally forced a change in the situation. The baby, perhaps sensing her mother's anxiety, became colicky, crying for hours each night despite all efforts to soothe her. After the third such night, Marguerite sat in the rocking chair, tears streaming down her face as she tried to comfort her screaming daughter. Isaac appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from sleep, concern etched on his features. "Let me," he said quietly, crossing to take the red-faced infant from Marguerite's arms. To her astonishment, Emma's cries began to subside as Isaac walked the floor with her, humming a low tune and patting her back with a gentle rhythm. "How did you do that?" Marguerite asked when Emma's eyes finally closed in sleep. Isaac shrugged, still swaying slightly with the baby against his shoulder. "My sister had 4 little ones. I helped when I could." He laid Emma carefully in her cradle, then turned to Marguerite. "This can't go on," he said firmly. "You're exhausting yourself with worry, and now it's affecting Emma." "What choice do I have?" Marguerite asked, her voice breaking. "He won't leave." "Then we will." Isaac knelt beside her chair, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. "I have a line cabin up in the mountains. It's remote, but comfortable enough. We could go there, just the 3 of us, until this blows over." Marguerite stared at him. "You would do that? Leave your ranch. Frank can handle things here," Isaac said with confidence. "And it would only be for a short time." "Caldwell can't stay in Arizona territory forever. He has business interests back east, responsibilities that will eventually call him home." The idea was tempting, a safe haven, away from the constant fear of discovery. "When would we go?" "Tomorrow," Isaac decided, "at first light. We'll tell the hands we're taking a trip to inspect the northern grazing lands. Only Frank will know the truth." Marguerite nodded slowly. "All right, the mountains it is." They left before dawn, with only Frank to see them off. The foreman promised to send word if Gregory showed any sign of leaving the area, or if he came to the ranch asking questions. The journey to the line cabin took most of the day, following trails that grew increasingly steep and narrow as they climbed into the mountains. Emma, bundled warmly against the morning chill, seemed to enjoy the motion of the wagon, cooing and looking around with bright interest. By late afternoon, they reached their destination, a sturdy log cabin nestled in a small clearing, with tall pines surrounding it and a stream gurgling nearby. It was more primitive than the ranch house, with only 2 rooms, but it was clean and well-maintained, with supplies already stocked in anticipation of the occasional cowhand who might need shelter while tending to cattle in the high pastures. "It's not what you're used to," Isaac apologized as he helped Marguerite down from the wagon, "but it's safe." Marguerite looked around at the peaceful clearing, breathing in the scent of pine and wildflowers. For the first time in weeks, the tight knot of anxiety in her chest began to loosen. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. Life in the mountain cabin fell into a simple rhythm. Isaac hunted and fished, keeping them supplied with fresh meat. Marguerite cooked on the small iron stove and tended to Emma, who thrived in the mountain air. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, talking or reading from the small collection of books Isaac had brought along. It was a domestic scene that neither had expected when they entered their marriage of convenience, yet both found themselves settling into it with surprising ease. One evening, as they sat watching the flames dance in the fireplace, Emma sleeping soundly in a cradle Isaac had fashioned from half a barrel, Marguerite found herself studying her temporary husband's profile. The firelight cast his features in sharp relief, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crook in his nose from an old break, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked softly, catching her gaze. Marguerite blushed, embarrassed to be caught staring. "I was thinking about how strange life is. A month ago I was running for my life. Now I'm hiding in a mountain cabin with a man I barely know, pretending to be his wife. Does it bother you, the pretense?" She considered the question carefully. "Not as much as it should, perhaps. You've been kind, Isaac, kinder than I had any right to expect from a stranger." He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious in the flickering light. "You're not a stranger anymore, Marguerite." The simple statement hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. "No," she agreed softly. "I suppose I'm not." Isaac reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool mountain air. "If circumstances were different," he said, his voice low, "if we had met another way," Marguerite's heart quickened. "If we had met another way, I would have courted you properly," Isaac finished. "Brought you wildflowers and taken you on picnics by the creek. Asked permission to call on you from your father." The romantic image brought a smile to Marguerite's lips. "And if my father approved, then I would have asked for your hand the right way, not this hasty arrangement we have now." Marguerite's smile faded as reality reasserted itself. "But circumstances aren't different. I'm still a widow on the run with a child who isn't yours and a brother-in-law who won't rest until he finds us." Isaac's hand dropped away. "You're right, of course, I spoke out of turn." "No," Marguerite said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. "You didn't, it's just complicated," Isaac nodded, turning back to the fire. "Complicated," he agreed, "but not impossible." Before Marguerite could respond, a cry from the cradle announced that Emma was awake and hungry. The moment was broken, but the words and the possibility they represented lingered in Marguerite's mind long after Isaac had retired to his bedroll in the outer room. They had been at the cabin for nearly 2 weeks when a rider approached one afternoon while Isaac was chopping wood and Marguerite was hanging laundry on a line strung between 2 pines. Both froze at the sound of hoofbeats, exchanging alarmed glances. "Get inside," Isaac ordered, reaching for the rifle that was never far from his side these days. Marguerite scooped up Emma from her blanket on the ground and hurried into the cabin, her heart pounding. Through the window, she watched as Isaac stood waiting, rifle ready but not raised, as the rider came into view. The tension left Isaac's shoulders as he recognized Frank, and Marguerite released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It's safe," Isaac called, and she emerged from the cabin, Emma on her hip, Frank dismounted, looking weary from the long ride. "Boss, madam, got news you'll want to hear." "Come inside," Marguerite invited. "I'll put on coffee." Once they were settled around the table with steaming cups, Frank delivered his news. "Caldwell's gone," he said without preamble. "Took the eastbound stage yesterday morning, told the hotel keeper he was heading back to Philadelphia." Marguerite's hand trembled so badly that coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup. "Are you certain?" "As certain as can be," Frank confirmed. "Paid his bill in full, tipped the staff generously, and left a forwarding address in Philadelphia for any messages." Isaac's eyes met Marguerite's across the table. "It could be a trick," he said cautiously, "to lull us into a false sense of security." "Thought of that," Frank admitted. "So I had one of the boys follow the stage a fair distance. Caldwell was still on it when it reached the territorial border." Relief washed over Marguerite in a dizzying wave. "He's really gone." "Seems that way," Frank agreed. "Reckon he decided you weren't in these parts after all." Isaac studied Marguerite's face. "This means you're safe. You can continue to California as you planned." The words should have brought joy, but instead, Marguerite felt a curious emptiness at the thought of leaving. "Yes," she said slowly, "I suppose I can." Later, after Frank had eaten a hearty meal and departed to return to the ranch, Marguerite and Isaac sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple. Emma was asleep inside, content after her evening feeding. "When would you like to leave?" Isaac asked, breaking a silence that had stretched between them since Frank's departure. Marguerite turned to look at him, studying his profile in the fading light. "Is that what you want, for me to leave?" Isaac's jaw tightened. "What I want doesn't matter. Our arrangement was always meant to be temporary." "You didn't answer my question," Marguerite persisted. "Do you want me to go?" He met her gaze then, his gray eyes turbulent with emotion. "No," he said simply, "I don't want you to go. But I won't keep you if California is still where your heart lies." Marguerite looked out at the mountains, considering his words. When she had fled Philadelphia, San Francisco had represented safety, a new beginning, a place where Gregory couldn't find her. But now, "My cousin in San Francisco is a stranger to me," she said softly. "We've exchanged letters over the years, but we haven't seen each other since we were children. I chose that destination because it was far from Philadelphia, not because I had any real connection there." Hope flickered in Isaac's eyes. "And now I find myself with connections here." Marguerite gathered her courage. "With you, with this life we've created, even if it began as a pretense." Isaac turned fully toward her, taking her hands in his. "Marguerite, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that I care for you, Isaac Blackwood," she admitted, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "More than I thought possible after what happened with William. I'm saying that Emma needs a father who will love her as his own. And I'm saying that if you still want us, then perhaps our temporary arrangement could become something more permanent." Joy transformed Isaac's features, making him look younger, almost boyish in his happiness. "I've wanted to ask you to stay since the day I found you in the desert," he confessed. "But I didn't want you to feel obligated or to think I was taking advantage of your situation." "And now," Marguerite asked, hope rising in her chest, "now I'm asking properly." Isaac slid from the porch bench to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "Marguerite Elizabeth Caldwell, will you stay and be my wife not just on paper but in truth? Will you let me be a father to Emma and perhaps, in time, give her brothers and sisters to grow up with? Will you build a life with me here where you'll never have to run or be afraid again?" Tears spilled down Marguerite's cheeks, but they were tears of happiness, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Isaac, I will." He rose and pulled her to her feet, his arms encircling her waist. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss that was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. When they parted, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "We should go home," he murmured. "To the ranch, start our life together properly." Marguerite nodded, her heart too full for words. They returned to the Circle B the next day, where Abigail welcomed them with knowing smiles and a feast fit for a celebration. If the housekeeper suspected that the nature of their marriage had changed, she kept her thoughts to herself, though her eyes twinkled as she watched them together. Word spread quickly among the ranch hands that the boss and his wife had returned, and that evening they gathered on the porch to officially welcome Marguerite to the family. Frank proposed a toast with glasses of whiskey for the men and lemonade for Marguerite, to the boss and Mrs. Blackwood, he said, raising his glass. "May your days be long and your nights never lonely." Laughter and cheers followed the slightly ribald toast, and Marguerite found herself blushing as Isaac's arm tightened around her waist. "I think that's our cue to retire," Isaac murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. They slipped away amid more good-natured teasing, Isaac carrying a sleeping Emma as they climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, their bedroom now, in truth. As Isaac laid Emma in her cradle, Marguerite stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape of the ranch. From here, she could see the bunkhouse where lanterns still glowed, the corral where horses moved like shadows in the darkness, the distant mountains rising against the star-filled sky. "Home," she whispered, testing the word. Isaac's arms encircled her from behind, drawing her back against his chest. "Home," he agreed, his lips finding the sensitive spot just below her ear. "Our home." Marguerite turned in his embrace, lifting her face to his. I never thought I would find this again, she admitted. Safety, belonging. Love, love, Isaac repeated, his eyes darkening as he gazed down at her. Yes, Marguerite, I do love you, more than I thought possible. And I love you, she said, the words coming easily now that they had been spoken aloud. I think perhaps I have since you found us in the desert. His kiss was different this time, deeper, more urgent, a promise of the passion they would share. Marguerite responded in kind, her arms twining around his neck as she surrendered to the feelings she had denied for too long. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Marguerite's head pillowed on Isaac's chest, she felt a peace she had thought forever lost to her. The future stretched before them, full of promise, a life built on love and trust, where neither she nor Emma would ever need to run again. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Marguerite smiled in the darkness. "I was thinking that sometimes the wrong path leads to the right destination." Isaac's chuckle rumbled beneath her ear. "I reckon that's true enough. Though I'd prefer if you didn't collapse from heat exhaustion the next time you decide to find me. I'll try to arrange a more convenient meeting," Marguerite promised, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Perhaps one that doesn't involve carrying a baby across the desert." "Speaking of babies," Isaac said, his voice growing serious, "I meant what I said about Emma. I'll raise her as my own, Marguerite. No one will ever know she isn't my flesh and blood unless you want to tell her someday." Tears pricked at Marguerite's eyes at the simple, heartfelt promise. She couldn't ask for a better father. In the cradle across the room, Emma stirred and made a small sound. Before Marguerite could move, Isaac was already rising, pulling on his trousers. "I'll get her," he said softly. "You rest." Marguerite watched as he lifted Emma carefully, cradling her against his broad chest with a tenderness that made her heart swell. He brought the baby to the bed, settling beside Marguerite as she prepared to nurse. "Our daughter," Isaac murmured, watching as Emma latched eagerly. "Our family." The words were a benediction, a promise, a future secured in 3 simple syllables. 5 years later, Marguerite stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Isaac taught their son James to ride his first pony. Emma, now a lively 5-year-old with her mother's blonde hair and her adoptive father's gray eyes, bounced excitedly beside them, already an accomplished rider herself. "Be careful, Jamie," Marguerite called as the 3-year-old boy wobbled precariously in the small saddle. Isaac's steady hand never left the child's back. "He's fine, Mama," he called back with a grin. "Got a natural seat, this one." Pride swelled in Marguerite's chest as she watched her family. The years had been kind to them. The Circle B had prospered under Isaac's management, expanding to nearly double its original size. Their home had grown too, with a new wing added to accommodate their growing family. Emma had no memory of the desperate journey that had brought them to Arizona, nor of the man whose blood she carried. To her, Isaac was Papa, the center of her world, the man who taught her to ride and read and count the stars. James, born 2 years after their marriage, was his father in miniature, with the same dark hair and determined expression. And now, Marguerite thought, resting a hand on her still flat stomach, there would be a 3rd child to join their family come spring. She hadn't told Isaac yet, wanting to be certain before sharing the news. But she had no doubt of his reaction, joy, followed by even more protective behavior than usual, something she pretended to mind but secretly cherished. Gregory Caldwell had never returned to Arizona territory. Through discreet inquiries, Isaac had learned that he had suffered financial reversals in recent years, his banking interests undermined by poor investments and changing markets. The once powerful man who had terrorized Marguerite was now fighting his own battles for survival in Philadelphia's cutthroat business world. The knowledge brought not satisfaction but a sense of closure. The past was truly behind them now, leaving only the future bright and full of promise. "Mama." "Look at me," Jamie called, his face alight with accomplishment as Isaac led the pony in a small circle. "I see you, sweetheart," Marguerite called back, waving. "You're doing wonderfully." Emma, not to be outdone, scrambled onto the corral fence. "Can I have my turn now, Papa? You promised." Isaac laughed, the sound carrying across the yard. Patience, princess. Your brother gets 5 more minutes, then it's your turn. As Marguerite watched them, a wave of gratitude washed over her. How different her life might have been if she hadn't collapsed on that desert trail, if Isaac hadn't found her and Emma when they needed him most. One wrong turn had led her to the right path. One act of kindness had changed the course of 3 lives. One man had taken her burden and called it his own, transforming duty into love, pretense into truth, strangers into family. "Are you coming, Mama?" Emma called, breaking into Marguerite's reverie. "Papa says we can all ride to the creek for a picnic." Marguerite smiled, descending the porch steps to join her family. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." As Isaac helped her mount her mare, his hand lingered on hers, his eyes asking a silent question about her unusual thoughtfulness. "Later," she mouthed, with a smile that promised joyful news. He nodded, understanding without words as they so often did now. Then he swung into his own saddle, Jamie secure before him, while Emma rode her pony alongside. Together, the Blackwood family rode toward the creek, their laughter carrying on the Arizona breeze a sound of happiness that had begun with a chance encounter in the desert, and would continue, Marguerite knew, for all the days of their lives.